Howdy and welcome everybody. Today, I'm gonna be giving you a detailed breakdown of my 2JZ Swap 240SX. Now, I've broken this video up into different sections, so if you're interested in something in particular, you can just jump right to it. So first things first, let's jump into the overview of the car. This is a 1991 240SX hatchback with a 2JZ GTE VVTi engine, making 580 horsepower to the wheels. It is single turbo swapped, and the car itself weighs about 2,900 pounds with half a tank of gas and no driver. So with that out of the way, let's get into the drivetrain section of the video. We'll start up here at the front of the car and we'll just work our way back. So let's start out with the engine. I refreshed and rebuilt this 2JZ GTE VVTi about 3 years ago. The cylinder head was upgraded by Head Games Motorworks with GSC Stage 1 cams, GSC conical valve springs and retainers, and Farah 6000 series valves. Sitting below the head is an HKS 2mm thick head gasket and ARP head studs to hold everything together. It's running Manley forged pistons with a 9:1 compression ratio, OEM connecting rods with brand new wrist pin bushings, and ACL race bearings all around. Just like with any good engine rebuild, all seals, gaskets, and belts were replaced, along with the oil, water, and power steering pumps. Working our way back a little bit, the transmission on this thing is a Granis Racing T56 Magnum F. The flywheel is just a basic steel flywheel, and the clutch is a McLeod Street Supreme Stage 4 single disc. It's also running a Tilton hydraulic throwout bearing, which connects to a Willwood clutch master cylinder. Behind the transmission is an aluminum one-piece drive shaft, which is also supplied through the Granis Racing kit. That connects to a stock 240SX differential housing with an OS Geiken Superlock LSD, which I'm proud to say I installed myself. The axles are driveshaft shop Stage 5 900 horsepower axles, and finally, the wheels are 17-inch Enkei RPF 1s with a +22 offset all around, wrapped in Dunlop Dureza Z3 200 treadwear sport tires in a 245/40/17 size. This wheel and tire combo did take some minor fender rolling and pulling to get it to a point where it doesn't rub. Now let's talk about the parts surrounding the engine. The 2JZ is sitting on excessive manufacturing poly motor mounts and brackets. It's using the stock intake manifold and throttle body, however it is using the Drift Motion drive-by-wire to leak kit. The power steering system is from Chase Bays, and I added the optional power steering cooler, which is tucked away in the front fender well. It's running custom fabricated 3-inch intercooler piping along with a 240SX CX Racing intercooler. We've also got a Tile Sport Q blow-off valve to relieve all that boost pressure. The harmonic damper on this engine is a brand new OEM unit, and it also runs a billet timing belt tensioner from Drift Motion to support the higher rev limiter. On the hot side of the engine, we've got a Borg-Warner S366 turbo with a 0.88 A/R, a 46mm precision turbo wastegate, a CX Racing exhaust manifold, downpipe, and single exit exhaust. I ended up getting the downpipe ceramic coated and installed a turbo blanket to keep the engine bay temperatures down. It's kinda hard to see, but all the wastegate plumbing is PTFE steel braided hose with DEI heat wrap and AN fittings. I did want to quickly explain the PCV system I'm running on this engine. Most people run an oil catch can that vents to atmosphere, and that will get the job done. However, I did a lot of research and found that there are more benefits to running an OEM Plus style PCV system, where on the intake valve cover you run the stock check valve and OEM connecting hose to the intake manifold, and on the exhaust valve cover you run a hose directly to the pre-turbo intake pipe. This system actually pulls a vacuum on your crankcase when the engine sees boost, which is better for the engine, and during non-boosted driving, the intake manifold pulls clean air through the crankcase, which actually helps to keep your engine clean. So with the drivetrain section out of the way, let's move on to the electronics section. The wiring harness is from Wiring Specialties, and a Haltech Elite 2000 ECU is the brains of the whole operation. The engine runs R35 GTR smart coil packs along with a Mechman 170 amp high output alternator. The alternator was relocated to the intake side of the engine to help keep the alternator cooler. Idle control is done through a remote IACV from Drift Motion, which ports into the side of the intake manifold. The battery was relocated to the rear of the 240SX with the help of a universal battery relocation kit from Summit Racing. The wiring harness on the transmission includes a reverse lockout feature along with a speedometer calibration unit. This allows me to calibrate the speedometer on the gauge cluster to read the proper speed. We could get into the nitty-gritty with all the different sensors and the boost control solenoid I'm running, but I have another video on my channel that goes over all of that if you are interested. So that wraps up the electronics section. Now onto the cooling system. Starting out with the radiator, we have a Chase Bays tucked radiator with two Mishimoto Raceline fans. This is a fantastic setup, and even though it takes a little bit of work to get it all to fit, I've had no cooling issues with my car since this install. An important note here though is that if you are running this Chase Bays tucked radiator, it is necessary to run a low temperature thermostat or you'll have issues with the thermostat not opening properly. I myself am running a Mishimoto low temperature thermostat. Sandwiched between the radiator and the intercooler is a Koyo 10-row oil cooler, which is mounted on some custom-made brackets. As I mentioned before, we also have our power steering cooler from Chase Bays sitting in the front fender well. The coolant overflow reservoir is an OEM unit that I've moved to the left-hand side of the engine bay with some custom brackets. I did this to avoid clearance issues with the intercooler piping. This carbon fiber radiator cooling panel helps to route airflow through the radiator, along with an engine under tray from 2PM, which aids cooling and engine bay cleanliness. And that'll do it for the cooling system. Now on to the fuel system. Alright, so just a note to start off, this engine is tuned on 93 octane, so please keep that in mind while I go through the fuel system here. The fuel rail is from Radium Engineering, and I've also installed a Radium fuel pulse damper. We are running ID 1050X injectors, an Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator, and PTFE steel braided hose all the way through the fuel system. The way my fuel system is set up is called a deadhead or returnless setup, which is when you only have a fuel line feeding the fuel rail and no return line from the rail. We are running a Fuel Labs inline fuel filter, a Radium fuel tank hanger, and two Walbro 450 fuel pumps that are staged. That means that one fuel pump is on all the time and the other comes online when we hit 10 psi of boost. This is done to avoid vapor locking the fuel system. With the fuel system wrapped up, let's take a look at the interior on the 240. I've tried to keep the interior of this car as stock as possible. What's really cool is that it even retains the automatic seatbelts and privacy cover in the back. Starting with the dashboard, there are 3 Autometer Spec Pro gauges mounted in a Street Faction air vent panel. Mounted on the steering column is a custom trim panel from Ortiz Custom Pods, which houses an Autometer Spec Pro boost gauge and an AEM air-fuel ratio gauge. I already mentioned that we have a working speedometer and RPM gauge, but with the Wiring Specialties harness, each and every gauge and light on the stock gauge cluster functions as normal, even the check engine light. Down near the radio head unit is a custom fabricated panel which houses 4 switches. One is for the fuel pump, another is a radiator fan override, the boost switch changes the tune on the engine and increases boost pressure, and the last switch is for 2-step. The Haltech ECU is mounted in the glove box for easy access, and the steering wheel is a Sparco L360 leather wheel with a working horn and an NRG quick release. And because I'm all about safety, a fire extinguisher is mounted behind the center console. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the suspension on the car. The coilovers on the 240 are Feel 441s, which have custom spring rates to help compensate for the extra weight of the 2JZ and T56 transmission. We are rocking a full SPL suspension kit in the front and the rear of the car, which use Teflon lined bearings and titanium to really stiffen up the chassis while keeping everything ultra lightweight. We are also running 300ZX tie rods with SPL end links, which allows us to tune out bump steer, and all the bushings in the rear knuckle have been upgraded to poly bushings from GK Tech. There is a Siki sway bar in the front, which is necessary for the 2JZ swap in this car, but the rear sway bar has been left stock. I just upgraded all the rear sway bar bushings to poly bushings. Also up front is a P2M strut tower brace to provide a little more rigidity to the chassis. All of the other suspension components that were not upgraded were replaced with brand new OEM units and hardware to completely refresh the drivability of the car. I also had a performance alignment and corner balance done on the car once the suspension upgrades were complete. With the suspension section wrapped up, let's take a look into our final section, which is brakes. Now up front, we have a CTSV big brake conversion, which are basically just 4-pot Brembo calipers, and in the rear are just some brand new OEM calipers. The rotors in the front are full face 350Z rotors, and in the rear we have some P2M slotted rotors. The brakes are connected to a 300ZX master cylinder, which gives better brake feel with the big brake conversion. All of the brake lines are braided stainless steel lines from ISR and GK Tech. And finally, the brake pads are Hawk Performance track pads all the way around. Well guys, that is gonna do it for this one. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments section below. So with that, I am out of here. I hope you enjoyed. Take care.